Welcome the Lord's chosen. Nothing about your past disappears. It only changes who is watching. Most people think the past is something you outgrow, outlive, or outrun. They treat it like a closed chapter, neatly filed away and never reopened. But the truth is far less comforting and far more interesting. The past doesn't vanish. It circulates. It gets reviewed, reinterpreted, and sometimes quietly flagged. Here's a fact most people don't realize. Patterns matter more than events. Systems don't care about single mistakes, dramatic failures, or even loud success. They care about consistency, deviation, and anomaly. One unusual moment can be ignored. A pattern of unusual behavior gets archived. And a pattern that doesn't fit any known box gets attention, not public attention, the kind that doesn't send notifications. That's where this topic lives. Some people ended up on a list because they broke rules, others because they followed them too well. But a very small group made it there for a stranger reason. Their past revealed something that couldn't be classified easily. They adapted when they were supposed to break. They detached when they were supposed to cling. They walked away from things that normally hook people for life. That doesn't scream rebellion. It whispers independence. And no, this isn't about secret agents, shadow rooms, or someone dramatically circling your name in red ink. It's much quieter than that, almost boring on the surface. Spreadsheets, profiles, risk models, behavioral notes, the kind of thing that sounds harmless until you realize it's built to notice who doesn't behave like everyone else. There's also a mildly ironic twist here. The very traits that once got you overlooked, misunderstood, or labeled difficult are the same ones that later made you interesting. Not invite to the party interesting. More like keep an eye on this one interesting, which depending on your sense of humor is either flattering or deeply inconvenient. So if you've ever felt like your past was doing more than just sitting behind you, if it felt like it quietly followed you into rooms you never announced yourself in, this isn't paranoia. It's pattern recognition. And that's exactly what we're about to unpack. Number one, your past showed a pattern they couldn't categorize. Most systems are built on sorting people into neat, predictable boxes, not because it's fair, but because it's efficient. If someone behaves in a familiar way long enough, they become easy to forecast. Their choices, reactions, and limits can be estimated with uncomfortable accuracy. Your past disrupted that process, not through chaos or noise, but through inconsistency that wasn't random. You didn't repeat the same responses in similar situations, and that made your pattern hard to name. What stood out wasn't that you failed or succeeded, it was that you adjusted. When pressure increased, you didn't always resist or submit. Sometimes you stepped back. Other times you moved sideways. Occasionally you advanced when retreat was expected. From the outside, this looks confusing. From a systems point of view, confusion is not ignored, it's logged. Anything that doesn't fit existing categories requires closer observation. The most unsettling part is that your behavior still made sense. It just didn't make sense in the usual order. You weren't impulsive, emotional, or reckless. You made decisions that worked for you, even when they contradicted common incentives. That kind of logic doesn't follow crowd psychology, and it doesn't respond well to standard pressure points like fear, reward, or approval. Over time, this creates a quiet problem. If someone can't be reliably predicted, they can't be easily steered. And if they can't be steered, they don't belong in any predefined group. Your past revealed a mind that recalibrates instead of repeats. That's not something most frameworks are designed to handle. So the response is simple and subtle. No confrontation, no announcement, just classification as interesting. A note rather than a label. A pause instead of a verdict. Your history wasn't alarming, but it was irregular enough to resist automation. And when something resists automation, it requires human attention. That's the real reason your past mattered. Not because it was dramatic, but because it refused to behave on schedule. You didn't move in straight lines, and you didn't loop endlessly either. You evolved in short, quiet adjustments that made tracking you harder than expected. In a world obsessed with predictability, that alone is enough to set you apart. Number 2, you learned things without being officially taught. There's a difference between knowledge that comes with permission and knowledge you take for yourself. Most people wait for guidance, manuals, or approval before they understand something. You didn't. Your past shows a pattern of absorbing, analyzing, and applying lessons that weren't offered to you. You didn't need someone to point the way. You found it, figured it out, and turned it into something actionable. That kind of learning sticks out because it's quiet, self-propelled, and far more adaptive than conventional education. What makes this remarkable isn't that you were curious. It's that your curiosity had purpose. You didn't chase information for validation or recognition. You gathered it because survival, growth, or efficiency demanded it. Whether it was understanding human behavior, mastering a skill, or navigating situations others didn't notice, you became fluent in patterns and principles that were invisible to most people. Over time, this creates an invisible advantage. It's not flashy. It doesn't announce itself. But anyone tracking outcomes notices it. Your ability to learn on your own, outside prescribed channels, changes how you're seen. Suddenly, you're not just another participant. You're someone whose capacity can't be ignored. There's also a subtle threat in this. Systems, organizations, and groups rely on predictability. They assume people will follow the rules, depend on training, and need supervision. You break that assumption. You don't wait to be handed the answer or the authority. You process information, make decisions, and adjust faster than most oversight can account for. That makes you reliable, yes, but also difficult to control. People who notice this instinctively pay attention, even if it's behind the scenes, because someone who can operate independently is both an asset and a wild card. Your past, therefore, tells a story of proactive intelligence. It wasn't a matter of luck or privilege. It was deliberate, consistent, and quietly disruptive. You didn't just absorb information. You converted it into insight and action without the usual checkpoints. And that's why your learning history isn't ordinary. It's a clear signal. You don't just react to the world. You interpret it, understand it, and navigate it on your own terms. And when someone realizes that about you, it becomes impossible to overlook. Number 3, you adapted faster than your environment expected. Change is the one thing most people fear, and predictability is what systems rely on. But your past shows something that disrupts that balance. You adapted faster than anyone around you could anticipate. Not in obvious, headline-grabbing ways, but in subtle, precise ways that quietly shifted outcomes in your favor. While others froze, argued, or stuck to old methods, you moved. You adjusted to circumstances before they even became fully visible, finding solutions that weren't being taught and responding to signals most people didn't notice. That level of adaptability isn't accidental. It's an ingrained skill, sharpened by experience, observation, and necessity. What makes this extraordinary is the speed and invisibility of it. Adaptation isn't just reacting, it's predicting the shift and adjusting in real time. Your past reveals repeated situations where you didn't simply survive change. You absorbed it, integrated it, and turned it into advantage. You didn't wait for instructions, reassurances, or permission. You didn't get stuck because the rules changed or because other people panicked. You simply recalibrated, often in ways that looked effortless to an observer. And the quieter the shift, the more profound its effect. It's not obvious until you notice the results, and by then, the system or group is already a step behind. This kind of adaptability is rare because it requires both detachment and awareness at the same time. You can't change effectively if you're too attached to old expectations, and you can't anticipate shifts if you're blind to subtle cues. Your history shows that you managed both. You processed new information quickly, prioritized what mattered, and discarded what didn't. That combination makes you unpredictable in the best possible sense, reliable in action, but impossible to fully forecast. That's why people or systems tracking you took note, not because you were loud, flashy, or disruptive, but because you didn't behave the way they expected. You evolved faster than the environment could categorize, and you did it so consistently that it became a recognizable pattern. Your past didn't just reveal who you were, it revealed how you moved through the world, quietly reshaping it while most people were still figuring out the rules. That's the kind of adaptability that leaves a lasting impression, whether anyone says it out loud or not. Number 4, you questioned rules before you questioned yourself. Most people learn to doubt themselves long before they ever challenge authority or the rules imposed on them. It's a subtle trap built into society. Obedience first, reflection later. Your past tells a different story. You didn't automatically accept what was handed to you. You observed, tested, and analyzed before internalizing it. You questioned the rules, the logic behind them, and the assumptions that shaped them, long before questioning whether you were good enough or doing it right. That makes all the difference because it shifts the locus of control from external expectation to internal evaluation. This kind of thinking isn't loud or rebellious in the traditional sense. It doesn't announce itself with dramatic gestures. Instead, it quietly signals intelligence, awareness, and independence. You weren't disobedient for the sake of defiance. You were precise, deliberate, and selective. Every choice you made carried the weight of scrutiny, not fear or habit. That's rare because most people are conditioned to follow first and analyze later, if at all. By questioning rules first, you naturally avoided the mistakes most people make. Blind compliance, wasted effort, or misaligned loyalty. There's also a subtle power in this behavior. When you process rules critically, you gain insight into how systems operate, what pressures they respond to, and where their weaknesses lie. You start seeing beyond the surface, understanding not just what is expected, but why it is expected. That perspective makes you hard to predict, and even harder to manipulate. People and institutions notice that quietly. They might not understand it immediately, but your independence sets a pattern that stands out. Your past shows repeated instances of this mindset. You didn't just follow instructions, you evaluated them. You didn't just participate, you understood the mechanics behind participation. That means every step you took wasn't merely reactive, it was informed. Systems thrive on predictability, but your past shows a mind that doesn't accept rules at face value. You processed, questioned, and decided. That alone leaves a mark, because when someone consistently operates on understanding rather than obedience, they can't be easily categorized or controlled. Your past didn't just teach you to survive. It taught you to see clearly, act deliberately, and navigate the world on your own terms. Number 5, you walked away from advantages others would kill for. Most people chase opportunities like a race, measuring success by who collects the most rewards, recognition, or power. Your past tells a different story. There were moments when everyone around you was scrambling, bargaining, or compromising to secure what seemed valuable, and you didn't. You walked away. Not out of ignorance or fear, but out of discernment. You understood that not every advantage carries the benefit it promises, and sometimes the cost outweighs the gain. That ability to step back, to refuse what others clamor for, sets you apart in ways most people don't even recognize at first. Walking away is rarely celebrated. Society glorifies the fighter, the achiever, the one who grabs, holds, and dominates. But your past shows a subtler kind of power, the courage to reject external incentives, the patience to wait for alignment instead of chasing appearances, and the clarity to prioritize freedom over validation. That choice isn't obvious to everyone. To outsiders, it can look like hesitation, lack of ambition, or even indifference. But those who study patterns, whether consciously or not, notice. They notice when someone refuses to play by expected rules, when someone operates outside the usual levers of motivation. And that's when a person becomes interesting. The implications of this behavior are profound. By refusing advantages that others die for, you exposed yourself to fewer entanglements, fewer dependencies, and fewer manipulations. You kept your agency intact. You signaled without speaking that you are not easily swayed by conventional incentives or external pressures. Systems and people that thrive on predictability take note of this quietly, cataloging the anomaly. Your past shows that walking away wasn't passive. It was strategic, deliberate, and consistent. You didn't abandon opportunities out of carelessness. You evaluated them, measured their impact, and acted in alignment with your own principles. That combination of independence, insight, and restraint is rare, and it creates a pattern that cannot be ignored. You didn't just step away. You redefined what matters on your own terms, and that alone makes your history unforgettable. Number 6. Your reactions didn't match what trauma usually produces. Most people are predictable under pressure. When faced with trauma, fear, or betrayal, their responses follow familiar patterns: panic, anger, withdrawal, or overcompensation. Your past, however, tells a different story. Time and again you confronted situations that would break most people, and your reactions didn't fit the expected script. You didn't collapse. You didn't lash out or fall into despair. Instead, you processed, recalibrated, and moved forward in ways that quietly defied what observers expected. That difference is subtle but powerful. It marks you as someone who cannot be easily categorized, someone whose inner structure is built differently. What makes this remarkable isn't the absence of emotion, it's the presence of control. You experienced intensity, loss, pressure, betrayal, but you didn't let it dictate your behavior. Where others would have reacted reflexively, you responded with measured precision. That doesn't mean you were cold or unfeeling. You felt fully, deeply, but without letting the situation hijack your decisions. That balance is rare, and it's noticed even when no one says a word. Systems, people, and even environments register it. They sense that your internal logic doesn't bend in predictable ways, and that makes you interesting and unpredictable. Over time, this creates an invisible pattern. Those who study human behavior, even casually, recognize that people who process trauma differently often operate with a silent advantage. They can see patterns others miss, maintain clarity when chaos unfolds, and act when everyone else is frozen. Your past reveals repeated instances of this pattern. It wasn't luck or immunity, it was your method of engagement. You converted difficulty into insight, challenge into clarity, and intensity into composure. That's why your history drew attention, not because you were dramatic or loud, but because you were quietly, consistently unbreakable in ways that defied expectation. Your reactions weren't textbook. They were uniquely yours, and anyone observing, even passively, would notice that you don't behave according to conventional scripts. That alone creates intrigue, signals strength, and makes your presence impossible to ignore. Number 7. You noticed inconsistencies others ignored. Most people move through life accepting what they're told, seeing only what they're shown, and ignoring the tiny contradictions that float in the background. Your past shows something different. You noticed the inconsistencies. You paid attention to the details that others dismissed as irrelevant or accidental, whether it was in people's words, behaviors, or the systems around you. You spotted the cracks, the mismatches, the gaps in logic that most simply walked past. That ability isn't just intelligence. It's a type of vision that quietly separates someone from the predictable crowd. Noticing inconsistencies doesn't mean you were obsessive or critical without reason. You processed them, cataloged them, and used them. You connected dots others didn't even see, creating a deeper understanding of the world and the people in it. Over time, this pattern of observation created a unique map that guided your decisions. You weren't following the obvious path. You were moving along lines that others couldn't perceive because they were too busy trusting the surface story, trusting what seemed convenient or expected. This behavior has consequences, and it didn't go unnoticed. When someone consistently sees what others overlook, it becomes hard to place them in a standard framework. Systems, institutions, and even social groups rely on consistency, predictability, and conformity. By identifying inconsistencies, you disrupted their ability to predict your behavior, which makes you quietly formidable. You didn't need to announce your awareness or act dramatically on it. Your insight alone changed how interactions unfolded around you. Your past shows that you didn't just observe discrepancies, you understood their significance. You could anticipate the results of hidden contradictions, and that informed your choices in subtle but impactful ways. That makes you hard to manipulate, hard to mislead, and hard to categorize. What most people ignore or rationalize, you internalized and turned into a tool. That alone is why you stood out. Your history of noticing inconsistencies reveals a mind tuned to reality beneath the surface, a mind that can navigate complexity others can't even register. And that makes every decision you made, every step you took, quietly powerful and impossible to overlook. Number 8. You resisted identity programming early on. Most people grow up absorbing labels, expectations, and identities handed to them by family, culture, or society. And they rarely question whether these definitions fit. Your past tells a different story. From an early stage, you resisted being boxed in. You didn't just accept the roles, titles, or categories placed in front of you. You examined them, tested them, and in many cases quietly rejected them. That resistance isn't rebellion for show. It's a kind of self-awareness that runs deeper than surface behavior. It reveals a mind unwilling to outsource its own identity to convenience, pressure, or approval. Resisting identity programming means you became selective about what defines you, rather than allowing the world to decide. You didn't conform to expectations simply to belong. You didn't mold yourself to satisfy labels like good student, loyal friend, or obedient participant, without weighing what those roles actually meant for your life. Every step, every choice, reflected an awareness that identity is not a costume to wear, but a structure you build from the inside out. That's a subtle but powerful distinction that most people never achieve. What this does is create a quiet pattern of independence. People and systems notice it, even if they can't always articulate it. You don't fit the usual mold. You can't be easily categorized. You operate on your own logic, using your own framework, and that unpredictability makes you interesting and, in some cases, unnerving. It signals a kind of mental autonomy that can't be taught or enforced. Your past shows that this resistance wasn't a single act. It was consistent, repeated, and deliberate. You didn't just refuse labels once. You navigated countless situations where identity expectations were pressed on you, and you chose authenticity over convenience. That subtle defiance builds a reputation invisible to most, but unmistakable to those paying attention. It marks you as someone who defines themselves rather than being defined, and that is the kind of quiet power that draws notice, keeps people cautious, and makes your past far more significant than anyone around you may realize. Number 9. You learned when to stay invisible and when to surface. Most people react to situations as they happen, either pushing forward or retreating based on emotion, pressure, or impulse. Your past tells a different story. You didn't just respond. You timed everything with precision. You knew when to blend into the background, absorbing information, watching patterns, and moving silently. And you knew when to step forward, when your presence or action would make the maximum impact. That ability to control visibility is rare because it requires patience, awareness, and self-discipline, and your history shows you mastered it without even needing recognition. Staying invisible isn't about hiding, it's about strategy. It's about understanding that there's power in observation, in learning who is who, what is important, and which moves will matter most. While others rushed to act or announce themselves, you gathered clarity, positioning yourself in ways that gave you control without forcing confrontation. And when the moment demanded it, you surfaced with precision, making decisions or taking action that seemed effortless to outsiders, but was the result of careful calculation. That timing, subtle as it is, changes the way people and systems perceive you. They notice the difference between someone who reacts and someone who moves intentionally, and that difference is impossible to ignore. Your past shows this pattern repeatedly. You didn't operate by the loudest signals, the most obvious incentives, or the pressure of expectation. You waited for the right alignment, the exact opening that would maximize your influence while minimizing exposure. That combination of patience and timing builds a type of quiet authority. People may not realize it immediately, but they sense that your presence is deliberate, measured, and unpredictable in all the right ways. By controlling when to be seen and when to remain unseen, you gained a subtle advantage over those who acted impulsively. You weren't just navigating life, you were navigating attention, perception, and opportunity. That makes your history intriguing, almost surgical in its efficiency, and impossible to ignore for anyone paying attention. Your past didn't just teach you to move, it taught you to move invisibly and strike intentionally. Number 10. You survived situations designed to break alignment. Most people crumble when the world pushes against them in ways that feel engineered to disrupt their focus, confidence, or sense of self. Your past shows something different. You survived situations that were constructed, intentionally or not, to fracture alignment, to make you question your direction, your principles, and even your worth. Where others would have stumbled, panicked, or adjusted in ways that diluted who they were, you endured, not through luck, not through denial, but through a quiet, consistent commitment to staying centered in yourself while chaos unfolded around you. That ability doesn't just show resilience, it signals a rare mastery of internal stability. Surviving these moments requires more than courage, it requires discernment. You learn to recognize which pressures demanded a response and which were designed to test your limits. You navigated manipulation, expectation, and the subtle ways environments try to bend people toward conformity. Instead of absorbing the pressure blindly, you absorbed insight. You allowed the situation to teach you, not break you, and in doing so, you emerged not only intact but sharpened. Each encounter strengthened your internal framework, creating a pattern that doesn't go unnoticed by those who observe outcomes rather than appearances. Your past shows repeated instances where external forces could have easily derailed you. And yet you didn't just survive, you adapted without losing cohesion. That kind of endurance is invisible on the surface, but profound underneath. People and systems notice it, even if only subconsciously. They see someone who doesn't bend predictably, someone who maintains direction despite chaos, and that makes you both intriguing and difficult to control. Surviving these challenges wasn't about being invincible. It was about understanding your boundaries, your capacity, and your principles, and refusing to compromise them unnecessarily. That combination of awareness, control, and endurance creates a presence that registers without noise. Your past proves that you aren't just reacting to the world, you're calibrating yourself to it, remaining aligned while others fall out of step. That's why your history drew attention. It's not the drama you survived, it's the clarity, poise, and consistency with which you did it. Number 11. You showed restraint where aggression was expected. Most people respond to pressure, conflict, or provocation with a reflexive surge, anger, retaliation, or a need to assert dominance. Your past tells a different story. Time and again, you faced situations where aggression, confrontation, or loud responses were expected, and you didn't follow the script. You exercised restraint. You paused, measured, and acted with control rather than impulse. That restraint isn't weakness, it's deliberate power, the kind that quietly shifts the dynamic of any interaction without drawing unnecessary attention to itself. Choosing restraint when everyone else lashes out creates a pattern that is both noticeable and disarming. People expect intensity, overreaction, or chaos in certain situations. When you respond differently, it destabilizes their expectations. They don't know how to categorize you. You become a variable that can't be predicted, because your responses aren't dictated by emotion or habit. They're guided by strategy, insight, and timing. That kind of control signals intelligence and self-mastery, qualities that systems, groups, and even individuals instinctively pay attention to, even if they can't put it into words. The power of restraint lies in its subtlety. You didn't need to dominate or loudly assert yourself to achieve influence. Instead, your measured approach created leverage silently. While others burned energy reacting to stimuli, you maintained clarity and perspective. You allowed the situation to unfold enough to understand the true dynamics, then acted decisively when it mattered, often with maximum effect and minimum fuss. That ability to balance patience and action is rare and deeply effective. Your past shows that this wasn't an isolated incident. It was a consistent pattern. You didn't simply hold back randomly. You understood the situations where restraint amplified your control and where action was necessary. That insight makes you difficult to predict, harder to manipulate, and impossible to ignore. Your history proves that true strength isn't always loud or aggressive. It's often quiet, measured, and intentional. By showing restraint where aggression was expected, you rewrote the rules of interaction without announcing it. And that creates a subtle authority that lingers long after the moment has passed. Number 12. Your past reveals selective loyalty, not blind allegiance. Most people give loyalty without question, often tying themselves to people, groups, or causes without thinking through the cost or the value of that commitment. Your past tells a different story. You didn't hand out trust or allegiance freely. You chose carefully, observed closely, and measured the integrity, intentions, and actions of those around you before committing. That kind of selective loyalty isn't about skepticism or cynicism. It's about self-respect and strategy. It's a recognition that your energy, effort, and alignment are valuable, and that giving them to the wrong people can have lasting consequences. Selective loyalty creates a quiet but unmistakable signature. It means that when you do commit, your presence, support, and reliability carry weight. People notice it, even if subconsciously. They sense that your allegiance isn't transactional or performative, it's intentional. That makes your trust harder to earn, but infinitely more impactful when granted. And that rarity draws attention. Systems, groups, and even individuals subconsciously track who operates with predictable devotion versus who exercises discernment. Your past shows that you consistently operated in the latter category. This approach also gives you independence. Blind allegiance can make people predictable, manipulable, and bound by expectation. By choosing when and where to invest your loyalty, you maintained agency, influence, and perspective. You weren't controlled by social pressure, hierarchy, or fear of rejection. Instead, your actions were aligned with your principles, understanding, and long-term vision. That's why selective loyalty is a subtle form of power. It communicates self-worth without words and signals a mind that evaluates before committing. Your history shows this pattern repeatedly. You didn't abandon relationships or responsibilities lightly, but you refused to hand over devotion without cause. That consistency built a reputation that others notice quietly. You are reliable, principled, and deliberate. Your loyalty isn't something people take for granted, and that alone sets you apart. By refusing to follow blindly, you became someone whose support carries weight, whose alignment matters, and whose past demonstrates a depth of judgment that commands attention. Number 13. You stopped seeking approval before most people even realize they're addicted to it. Most people spend their lives chasing approval without even noticing it. From a young age, they measure themselves against others' expectations, constantly adjusting to fit in, gain recognition, or avoid criticism. Your past shows something different. You broke free from that cycle early. You didn't need someone else's validation to confirm your worth or justify your decisions. That doesn't mean you were arrogant or disconnected. It means you developed an internal compass strong enough to guide you without constant external checks. That independence of judgment is rare, and it leaves a subtle mark on everything you do. Stopping the pursuit of approval isn't an act of rebellion. It's an act of self-calibration. When most people are busy looking over their shoulder, adjusting their tone, their choices, or their goals based on who's watching, you were focused on alignment with yourself. You learned to trust your instincts, measure your own standards, and make decisions that fit your logic and priorities, rather than the expectations of others. That creates a type of quiet power. People notice it even if they can't articulate why. You operate on a plane that doesn't bend to applause or criticism, and that makes your presence unpredictable in all the right ways. This kind of independence also changes how you navigate life. You don't waste energy on performing for external approval. You see situations clearly because you aren't clouded by the desire to please. That allows for faster, more precise decisions and actions that are entirely your own. Systems and observers, whether consciously or unconsciously, track this. Someone who doesn't play by the usual validation rules is hard to predict, difficult to manipulate, and often quietly respected, even if the respect is unspoken. Your past shows a consistent pattern. You made choices based on principles, clarity, and alignment, not on who might cheer or judge you. That self-reliance and refusal to seek constant validation sets you apart. It signals that you are guided by understanding, not external influence, and that combination of clarity, independence, and control is rare enough to draw attention. You didn't just break free from seeking approval. You became someone who moves in the world on their own terms, and that leaves a lasting impression. Number 14. You became self-referenced instead of externally validated. Most people live their lives looking outward, measuring every decision, thought, and feeling against what others think, want, or expect. Your past tells a different story. At some point, you shifted the reference point inward. You stopped using the world as a ruler and started using yourself. That doesn't mean you ignored feedback or lived in isolation. It means that your standards, your judgments, and your sense of direction came from a place of internal authority. That alone is rare, and it quietly sets you apart from the majority who rely on external validation to navigate their lives. Being self-referenced changes everything. It affects how you make decisions, how you evaluate relationships, and how you move through challenges. Instead of asking, "What will they think?" or "Will this be approved?" your measure became clarity, alignment, and principle. That shift allows for decisions that are faster, more precise, and less contaminated by noise. Systems, groups, and even individuals unconsciously register it. They notice someone who isn't reacting to the usual incentives or pressures, someone whose choices follow a pattern independent of external influence. That pattern marks you as different, intentional, and quietly formidable. Your past shows this pattern repeatedly. You didn't just occasionally trust your own judgment. You built a consistent habit of referencing yourself first. That doesn't mean you were inflexible. On the contrary, being self-referenced gave you freedom to adapt because you weren't tethered to external expectations. You could see situations clearly, respond intentionally, and maintain consistency under pressure. That combination of autonomy and adaptability is subtle but powerful. This approach also protects against manipulation. People who are guided externally can be nudged, coerced, or influenced by approval, criticism, or fear. You, however, operated from an internal logic that made influence much harder. Your past shows a mind that listens to itself, weighs outcomes, and acts deliberately. That self-referenced pattern doesn't shout for attention. It quietly commands it. You didn't just stop seeking validation. You became a person whose authority over themselves is visible in every decision, every action, and every interaction, leaving a mark that's impossible for observers to ignore. Conclusion. Your past isn't just a record of events. It's a blueprint of who you became, a map of how you move through the world in ways most people can't comprehend. Every choice you made, every observation you absorbed, and every boundary you set quietly shaped a pattern that is impossible to ignore. You adapted faster than expected, learned without permission, resisted programming, and acted with precision where others acted impulsively. You refused blind allegiance, trusted your own judgment, and became self-referenced in a world obsessed with validation. You didn't just survive challenges, you transformed them into insight, control, and clarity. The thread that connects all of this is subtle but powerful: consistency in independence. Every step you took reinforced the fact that you cannot be easily categorized, predicted, or manipulated. That's why your past drew attention, not because it was dramatic or loud, but because it revealed something deeper, a mind that operates on its own terms, guided by principle, awareness, and strategic intent. You moved silently but left a lasting impression, proving that true strength isn't always seen, but it is always felt. Understanding this about yourself changes everything. It reframes how you view your past, how you make decisions today, and how the world perceives you. The patterns, the insights, and the resilience embedded in your history are proof that you are not ordinary, and they explain why attention, quiet, calculated, and observant, has always followed you. If you found this eye-opening, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss insights like these. Like this video if it resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and leave a comment letting us know what part of your past you now see differently. Your journey is unique, and it deserves to be understood. Stay blessed always.